So it's great to have you here for the Daily Power Parsha. Today is November 18th, 2020. It's a Wednesday, which means that we have both our online version live and we have also our in-person version here at Intown Jewish Academy HQ on the Beltline in Atlanta, Georgia, overlooking Pond City Market in Midtown. I feel like just describing it. All right, we have an exploration today of two sections in the Torah portion of Toldot. Toldot, I remember when I was a kid, there was a kid's album, tape, album, record, whatever they had back then, not CD, and the character was saying cold toes instead of Toldot. That's not even a thing. All right, Toldot, you can find it in your Chumash. If you're in person, you can, well, everyone's in person, but if you're here with me, you can find it, the reading for today, this blustery day that's doing this page turning for me, 166. And for those of you that are joining us online, I'm going to pull up I'm going to be pulling up the reading in a moment, Parsha, and then we will share the screen and off and running. Okay, so again, page 166, fourth reading. Say it again. Yeah, I can talk louder for sure. Don't worry. I'll talk really loud. As soon as we begin learning, it's going to get loud. Good. Just saying. 166. There you go. All right, let's rock and roll. I'm sharing my screen online in 3. Matt, welcome. Thanks for being here with us. Toldot, reading number 4. This is the life and times of Isaac. Remember, we know very little about Isaac. We know mainly what happens to him, but we don't know a lot about what he does. What happens to him, binding of Isaac, well, miraculous birth, binding of Isaac, he's tricked into giving the blessings to the wrong son. What do we know about him? He's a well digger, very successful, and as we'll see here, had the respect of the locals, including Abimelech, the king of Gerar. And if there's one thing you wanted to be back then, it was on good terms with Abimelech. I'm just saying. I'm kidding. I don't know if that was the one thing that you wanted, but that certainly doesn't hurt. All right, let's jump in. I'm going to read the translation from this guy right here, but it's not going to be that much different than what we have online. Verse number 23. So Isaac went up from there to Be'er Sheva. That night God appeared to him and said, I am the God of Abraham, your father. Do not be afraid, because I am with you. I will bless you and multiply your descendants for the sake of Abraham, my servant. So once again, we have a promise of God's protection to Isaac and dropping the name of Abraham. Listen, Abraham must have been really dynamic because so much happens in his merit. You ever notice that? Even in the Amidah, 3 times a day, we say, Elokei Avram, we'll say Elokei Yitzchak, Elokei Yaakov. We refer to God as the God of Abraham and the God of Isaac and the God of Jacob, but Abraham really is got the in with Hashem. Let's continue. Verse 25. So Isaac, having had that assurance of a promise, of a blessing, Isaac built an altar there and he prayed in the name of God. He pitched his tent there, and Isaac's servants dug a well there. Can't get away from this well digging. He is a well digger par excellence. Next, verse 26. This is very interesting, and I'm going to share with you an insight of the Rebbe on this little piece of dialogue. If you're looking online, even if you're looking inside, you'll notice that the fourth reading, today's reading, is very short. Well, tomorrow we're not meeting for DPP because it's Thursday and I have the other class. So what we're going to do is we're going to do today reading 4 and reading 5, and then Friday we'll do 6 and 7. That's the plan. Let's jump in, verse 26. Abimelech, the aforementioned king, went to him from Gerar. Remember, Abraham was living in Gerar. Let me give you the breakdown. Gerar was a place in the land of Canaan, and Abimelech was the head honcho there. So Isaac was living with Abimelech, or in that vicinity. And he was digging wells, and then there was a dispute amongst him and Abimelech's servants. this whole beef. So in yesterday's reading, we read how Abimelech at some point said to him, why don't you move somewhere else? Right? There's a lot. No, I mean, really, there's a lot of land. Move somewhere else so that we're not living on top of each other. So that's why he went to Beersheba. He went somewhere else, and there he was dwelling. So here the Torah tells us that Abimelech actually chases after him. Abimelech went to him, to Isaac from Gerar, with a group of his companions and Pichol, his army general. All right, verse 27. Isaac said to them, why have you come to me if you hate me and you sent me away from you? Don't you remember you told me that you got to go, you got to live somewhere else? It's not working out living on top of each other, right? So you sent me away and now you're coming to chase after me. What's going on? Why are you here? Verse 28. So they said, we see that God was with you, and we saw that God was with your father, Abraham. So we said, let the oath that was between us from the days of your father be between ourselves and you. If you recall, and I've mentioned this a few times, that Abimelech created a peace agreement, a covenant with Abraham. So what Abimelech is telling to Isaac, his son, is, look, you know, it's not good that we live like in very close proximity, but I do want to be your friend. And let's agree to be peaceful toward each other and to give each other space and to welcome each other and to be nice. Always a good deal. And so he says, let the same agreement that I had with your dad also extend to you and me. That's what he says. Let's continue. Let's form a covenant with you that you do no harm to us, just like. Oh wow, there's a typo in the Chumash. Yeah. Heyo, someone should contact the publisher in the printed version here. All right. So let's make a covenant that you do no harm to us, just like we have not touched you, and just as we only treated you well and sent you away in peace, you too, blessed one of God, now do the same. In other words, even when Abimelech says, even when I told you, like, it's not good to live in such close proximity, it's not working out, even in that case, I didn't fight with you. I asked you peacefully to move somewhere else. You know, we had a nice conversation about it. I wasn't mean about it. I didn't say like, oh, you got to go or else I'm going to like beat you up or, you know, hurt you or go to war against you. No, it was an amenable or peaceful conversation. And so Abimelech says, look, let's pledge now, you and I, that no matter what, we're going to be peaceful and be able to have these conversations. Verse 30, let's continue. Oh, I'm sorry. That's the end of the reading. That's the end of reading number 4 for Wednesday, for today. And I told you it's very short. I want to share, I really only have one insight because we spoke about Abimelech and Isaac and Wells in previous days in Daily Power Parsha. Just one thing I want to mention that's an insight from the Rebbe. And that is that we see that Abimelech is the one chasing after Isaac. So often we think that we have to be the ones that chase after the other one to make peace. In other words, like, we live in a world and we're the minority, and so we feel a little bit, what's the word I'm looking for? We have a bit of an inferiority complex. Like we have to chase away the other. And the Torah reminds us that if we're proud of who we are, the world will respect, others will respect that. Listen, you can't guarantee everyone is going to respect that, but by and large, people respect those who respect themselves, and they will come to us. Abimelech came to Isaac as out of respect, to create a peace agreement. So the idea here is not to sell our souls in order to make someone else happy, but to be who we are, to be a mensch, and hopefully that will inspire the other to come to us, to reach out to us, to create that peace, whether it's literal or metaphorical, however you want to understand it. You can understand it in the context of Israel today. You can understand it however you want to understand it, but that's a teaching. By the way, the Rebbe also says, This is why when Mashiach comes, and I mentioned this yesterday, we're going to say about Isaac, that Isaac, you are our father. In other words, Isaac specifically has a connection with the Messianic era, because in the Messianic era, it says that all the nations on their own will make a pilgrimage to the holy temple, to the holy spaces, because they'll realize the truth, they'll realize God, etc. And so the same thing is true with Isaac. Isaac was somebody who lived and embodied this depth of truth, and others came to him. Abimelech, in this case, came to him. No. Not necessarily reincarnated will be Isaac, but the concept, in other words, the energy of Isaac will be the energy of the Messiah. Just like Isaac represents the one who shines so brightly that he attracts others toward him, so too that will be the reality of the Messianic era. Maybe that's a better way of saying it, very straightforward way of saying it. It's kind of like, no, that's going to sound wrong, like the light that attracts the moths. No, but it's not moths. The point is to be a lighthouse, or to be a light that others are attracted to. In a similar vein, by the way, it says about King Solomon, that King Solomon stayed pretty much in Israel, and all of the nations, the kings and the queens and all the dignitaries came to him to check out the temple and to pay respects to the Jewish people and to Jerusalem, to the temple. So that's a similar type of energy that we're talking about here with Isaac and the Messianic era. Okay, so let's continue now. Yeah, go ahead, Mark.
Throughout history, Jews have been expelled from lands.
Yep.
And it wasn't a nice thing.
Correct.
We were told, you got to go. So why are
we saying it's a nice thing here?
Well, he says, I didn't molest you, but you essentially said, you're out.
Okay, so Mark is asking a very good question. Mark is saying, how does Abimelech say to Isaac now when he's chasing after him to create this peace agreement? He says, I didn't do any harm. I just sent you out. Mark is saying, are you kidding me? Sending out is harm, right? Expulsion, being expelled from your place, is harm. It's a good question. I don't know that I have an ironclad answer, but my understanding is, as Abimelech presented this idea previously about moving elsewhere, he framed it in a way that was nice. It was, look, we're not getting along. My servants are fighting with your servants. We're having constant battles over who owns wells and who owns this and that. So why not just move somewhere else? There's plenty of space. Move a little further out so we're not on top of each other. So it was less of a like, oh, I don't want any Jews around, as opposed to let's give each other more breathing room. That's how I understand it, and that's how it seems like Abimelech framed it. Now, maybe that's convenient framing by Abimelech, and maybe Isaac didn't look at it like that, but that's one way. I don't know that it's my job to justify it and say it was fine, but certainly in Abimelech's mind, that's how he was at least justifying it now, in at least in retrospect. But it almost sounded, as we read it a day or two ago, kind of like what Abraham said to Lot. Remember what Abraham said to his nephew? He said, look, my shepherds and your shepherds were fighting over like shepherd etiquette. It's not a thing, right? So maybe it is a thing. So instead of like the constant, at each other's throats, a lot of land, why don't you go somewhere else? So did he really kick Lot out? Or did he suggest maybe that they each give each other space? I told you when we studied that Torah portion that God took him to task. You make friends with everybody, but not your own nephew. Okay, fine. But nonetheless, there's a way to do it where it's harsher and a way to do it where it's a little bit nicer. But I guess any kind of distancing is on some level not so nice. All right, let's continue with verse 30. Now this jumps into the new reading. And in this reading, we're going to read about the taking, borrowing, stealing of the blessings, whatever you want to call it. All right, here we go. Verse 30. Isaac, Yitzchak made a feast for them, and they ate and drank. They got up early in the morning. This refers to Abimelech and his crew. They got up early in the morning and swore an oath with each other, or maybe they is all of them. They swore oath to each other. Isaac sent them off, and they went away from him in peace, in shalom. That's good. Then, verse 32, on that same day, Isaac's servants came and told him about the well they had dug, another well, Nacha well. Yeah, they said to him, we have found water. Man, I don't know what they were, I guess they had cattle or something, and this is probably before Evian, whatever, I'm just saying, but it's,
Israel have like innate sparkling water?
Does Israel have sparkling water innately? I don't know. But that sounds like a marketing thing. I'm sure you could market it as something, whatever. Add a few bubbles and call it a natural spring. I'm not saying you should. I'm just saying whatever. That could be a marketing thing as well. All right, let's continue. So they found new water. They struck water. Verse 33, he named it Shiva, oath. Why did he name it oath? He named it oath because that's where they took the oath of the covenant with each other. And the city is therefore called, the Torah says, Be'er Sheva, to this very day. Be'er Sheva means the well. Be'er means well. Of Sheva, Sheva means oath. It also means 7, but it also means oath. So it's the well of the oath. It's the well that was found shortly after the oath of peace between the two parties, the peace agreement. So he called it the city of the oath. Sorry, the city of the well of the oath, and that's the name Be'er Sheva to this very day. Let's continue. Very interesting piece of the narrative. This is verse 34, and I must share something with you that I think you'll find interesting in a moment. But let's read it first inside. Verse 34. When Esau was 40 years old, he married Judith, Yehudit, the daughter of Be'eri the Hittite. And he also married Basmas, the daughter of Elon the Hittite. Verse 35, their idol worship tormented Isaac and Rebekah, or online the version is, and they were a vexation to the spirit of Isaac and to Rebekah. They vexed the wives, vexed the spirit of his parents. So a few things I need to mention. Number one, so we find that Esau marries two women, Yehudit and Basmas. All right, there's a lot of discussion about who they were and why they were and what their deal was, but the consensus here is that they were both locals, steeped in idolatry, steeped in pagan ritual. Remember, this was a pagan land, so their idol worship, their idolatry pained Isaac and Rebekah. One thing that I want to mention, this is what I said that I would mention before. I'm going to toggle Rashi for a second online, so we'll do this together for those of you that can see the screen. Verse 34. Take a look at what Rashi says. For those of you here, there's Rashi also in English on page 167. Either way, Esau was compared to a swine. That's harsh. As it is said, the boar from the forest gnaws at it. This swine, when it lies down, stretches out its hooves as if to say, see, I'm a kosher animal. So do these, the chiefs of Esau, rob and plunder and then pretend to be honorable. During the entire 40 years, first 40 years of his life, Esau kidnapped wives from their husbands and violated them. When he was 40 years old, he said, my father married at 40, I too will do the same. He gets married at 40. Why at 40? Because his dad married at 40. Now, his dad was a tzaddik who had not been with anybody until he got married. Esau, on the other hand, was kidnapping and raping women before 40. But at 40, he didn't get married. So at 40, he gets married just like that. On the external level, it might seem like he's like his father, but of course, dig a little deeper, and he's nothing like his dad, and thus he's likened to the chazir. Chazir is the pig. What's with the pig? And this was the connection that Rashi just made from our sages, from an earlier midrashic source. So there are two signs of a kosher animal, as we've discussed in Daily Power Parsha, and as you probably know, and that is the animal chews its cud and has split hooves, then it's a kosher animal. Well, what if it has only one and not the other? It's not kosher. You're batting 500, but in kosher language, you're batting 0. Unless you have both, you got nothing for the kosher. So there are many animals, or some animals, that chew their cud but don't have split hooves. But there's only one animal in existence that has split hooves but does not chew its cud, and that is the pig. And the pig, the reason why the pig has such a negative reputation in Judaism is because it's imagined that the pig lies down, stretches out its hooves, and says, see, I'm kosher, I got split hooves. And because you can't see if it's chewing its cud, that's something that happens internally, unless you know, and we know, obviously, but it stretches out as if to say, look, I'm kosher. Remember we spoke about the shopkeeper law, about deception, about fraud, intellectual fraud, fooling someone into thinking something that's not true. The chazir, the pig, is the ultimate deceiver when it comes to kosher, when it comes to animals that aren't kosher. Other animals, their hooves are not split, so there's nothing on the outside that says, look, I'm kosher. But the pig, look, I'm kosher. Esau was, look, I'm kosher. I'm also getting married at 40. The ultimate deceiver. Make sense? Yes?
I thought the split it all the way through.
I don't know if the split hoof of the pig is all the way through, but our sages definitely say that it lies down with its hoofs out, as if to say, check me out, I'm kosher. Don't look any further. Right here. Anyway, but I don't know the anatomy. I'm not up to date on the latest anatomical reality of the pig. Okay, yeah.
But does the Torah explicitly forbid eating the meat of swine 2 times?
The Torah forbids the swine twice, but it also forbids other animals multiple times, specifically that have only one sign and not the other. I think there's 3 or 4 animals that go the other way, that do chew their cud, but do not have split hooves. In the Torah, I think it's the hyrax or something. The Torah definitely mentions them, maybe not the hyrax, whatever. Certain animals, the Torah mentions by name, that have one way, not the other, and the chazir is the only one that goes this way and not the other. In other words, one, not the other. There's multiple ones that have the chewing of the cud, but not split hooves. This is the only one, the pig, that has the split hooves, but not the chewing of the cud. And so again, the question is, why is the pig always considered so not kosher? If it's just as not kosher as so many other things that aren't kosher, right? The lion is also not kosher. So like we don't say like lion in a derogatory way. The reason that that's derogatory from a Jewish perspective is not because of unclean or mud. It's because of the sign that it does have and the fact that when it lies down, it does stick out its hooves. I think that's what it says, at least in the commentaries. And so that's kind of giving a false impression. Okay, let's jump in now to chapter 27. And this is the story of Jacob taking the blessings of Esau. For those of you that joined us for last week's Secrets of the Bible class, we spoke about this at length. But for everyone else, including those that were there, we're going to go through the story. And it's a fascinating story that evokes many, many questions. So let's jump in. Isaac was old, and he wanted to bless Esau. 169 in the books, on the screen, right there. Okay, this is the dramatic story. Isaac grew old, and he wanted to bless Esau. The vision of his eyes had dimmed. He wasn't able to see. By the way, why wasn't he able to see? Rashi quotes 3 different opinions as to what happened. Number 1, the smoke of the idol worship of Esau's wives, they burnt incense. The smoke of the idol worship irritated his eyes to the point that he lost his vision. That's one explanation in Rashi. The second explanation in Rashi is that when Isaac was bound up on the altar and his father was about to slaughter him, I'm reading from Rashi here on the page, the heavens opened and the ministering angels looked on and wept. The angels cried at the sacrifice that Abraham had, or the willingness that Abraham had to sacrifice his own son, and a tear emanated from heaven and landed in Isaac's eyes, and that caused him to be blind. So according to this opinion, it happened many decades earlier. According to the first opinion, it was recent. He had just become blinded by the idolatry, the idol worship, incense of Esau's wives. According to this other one, it happened all the way back at the binding of Isaac when he was 37 years old. And another explanation is it happened naturally. Well, it happened with age, but God facilitated it specifically for Jacob to be able to sneakily take the blessings. Had he been able to see, Jacob would not have been able to take the blessing. So how was it done? It was done through the fact that his eyes were no longer able to see. So that was done by Hashem. So 3 options, either idolatry, an angel, or God. 3 very different opinions, and I'm sure we could take a deep dive into it, but for now, let's move on with the story. So let's continue. His eyes were dim. He summoned Esau, his older son, and he said to him, "My son, I am here." Esau replied, "Look," says Isaac, "I've grown old. I don't know when I will die. So now, sharpen your tools, take your sword and your bow, and go out to the field and hunt game for me. Make for me the tasty foods that I love and bring them to me to eat. For doing this, my soul will bless you before I die." So he asks his son Esau, the son that's the hunter, to go out to the field to trap, to catch an animal, to prepare it for him for a meal. And then he says, after you give me the food to eat, then my soul will bless you. And all the commentaries are wondering, what's the connection between the food and the blessing? And we discussed this in our Secrets of the Bible class. I want to give you another interpretation that is, I think, very beautiful. And that is that Isaac knew that his son Esau needed some more merits in order to really deserve the blessing. So he gave him a mitzvah, the mitzvah of kibbud av, honoring your father. So he gave him he asked the request, he gave him a request. He asked him to get him food, to prepare food. When he did it, that would be a mitzvah for Esau. Are you with me on this? He wanted to give him a mitzvah merit. So he gave him a commandment, or he asked him to get him food. When he gave him the food and he ate it, that would be the merit to grab onto the blessing. Let's continue. Verse number 5. Rebecca now overheard, she was listening when Isaac spoke to Esau, his son. Esau went to the field to hunt game. He intended to bring meat from stolen animals, as he was, if he was unable to trap his own. That's what Rashi says. He was prepared to steal to make this happen. Rebecca, verse 6. Rebecca said to her son. Rebecca said to her son Jacob, look, I've heard your father speaking to Esau, your brother, saying, bring me game and make me tasty foods to eat, and I will bless you before my death, before God. Now, my son, listen to my voice to do what I am commanding you. Verse number 9. Go now to the flock and take 2 of my choice kids from there, and I will make one of them into tasty foods for your father, the types that he loves, since a goat tastes like game. Just so you know. You will bring them to your father to eat. For doing this, he will bless you before he dies. If you notice, Isaac asked for 2 goats. For 2 animals. Did Isaac ask for 2 animals, or she just said get 2 animals? Whatever. She definitely tells Jacob to take 2 of the choice kids. According to Rashi, why 2? Why 2 Gedi Izim, 2 choice kids? Rashi asked the question, could he have eaten two kid goats? No way. Rather, it was Passover. So one was to be brought as the Passover offering, and one for his own food. That's found in Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer. It's found in one of the Midrashic sources. So that's what Rashi explains. All right, so a little bit of trivia there as to the context of the 2 goats. Let's continue. I think we read verse 10. You will bring them to your father to eat. For doing this, he will bless you before he dies. Okay. Jacob, verse 11. Jacob said to his mother, Rebecca, but my brother Esau is a hairy person, and I, on the other hand, am smooth-skinned person. Maybe my father will feel me and see that I am an imposter. I'm a fraud, and I will bring upon myself a curse and not a blessing. Verse 13, but his mother said to him, let your curse be on me, my son. Listen to my voice. Go and get the goats for me. So he went and took the goats, and he brought them to his mother. His mother made tasty foods that his father loved. Rebecca took her elder son Esau's clean clothing, which she had in the house, from the dryer, joking, and she dressed Jacob, her younger son, in those articles of clothing. And then she put, verse 16, then she put the goat skins on his hands and on the smooth part of his neck, so that if the dad would reach out to touch him, he would feel hairy skin. She gave the tasty foods and the bread which she had made into the hand of Jacob, her son. All right, verse 18. So the ruse is in motion. Verse 18, Jacob came to his father and said, my father. And Isaac said, I'm here. Who are you, my son? Isaac said to his father, I am Esau, your firstborn. As Rashi says, in the Hebrew, he said, Ani, I, or I am. And then Esav Becharcha, Esau, your firstborn. So you could split it. I am. So who are you? I. and Esau is your firstborn. So he was, again, you could say that he wasn't saying, I am Esau, your firstborn, but rather, I am. In other words, who's there? Me, I'm here. And by the way, in case you're wondering, Esau is your firstborn. Anyway, I know it's, eats, shoots, and leaves type of punctuation here, but nonetheless, there's a little bit of potential punctuation adjustment that can be made to allow Jacob to not be, blatantly saying a non-truth. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So Adina Malka is asking, why did he ask his son, who are you, my son? Seems like he's suspicious. The answer is he was suspicious. He was suspicious because just the sound of his voice. When he said my father, he didn't sound like Esau. Now maybe he was, hello, my father. He tried to do some sort of deep voice. I don't know why I think of Esau as having a deep voice, but or maybe, as Mark is saying, maybe it took faster than it should have, right? Because you wasn't hunting and whatever. So maybe he was wondering, like, is this really you? Did you already get back from the field so fast? Usually takes hours. You put in the order, maybe in the morning for dinner. Meanwhile, it's back for lunch. So how does that happen? Possibly. I like that. Okay, good. Listen, we have our own commentaries here. We should write a book. DPP commentary. All right, let's continue. And by the way, feel free for the folks online, feel free to unmute yourself and jump in with any responses or any questions as we go on. It's hard for me to see the screen and the chat. So if you want to jump in, just unmute and jump right in. Okay, so, so let's continue. Let's start again from verse 19. So Jacob said to his father, I am Esau, your firstborn. I did what you told me. And then he says, please come and sit at the table and eat some of my game in order that your soul will bless me. Now, this word that he says, please come and sit at the table and eat of some of my game, this please business, that was not an Esau way of talking. So at this point, Isaac, the father, is really suspicious. He's super suspicious. The voice doesn't sound like Esau, and the language, right? The actual voice doesn't sound like him, and the language is not his language. He doesn't talk like this, Esau. Please? You'll see, by the way, when Esau does come in with the food, he doesn't know. You see, he's like, sit up, Dad. He doesn't say please. He gives him orders. Bit of a different approach. So this was already a red flag, another red flag. So please come and sit at the table and eat some of my game in order that your soul will bless me. Isaac, confirming Mark's theory. No, it's good. Verse 20. Isaac said to his son, how did you find it so quickly, my son? So again, now he's just expressing his suspicions. How did you get it so fast, my son, whichever one you are? So Jacob said, because God, your God, brought it to me. Once again, he's quoting he's thanking Hashem for his hunting prowess. Not happening. Esau is not thanking God. Baruch Hashem, it worked out so quickly. That's not an Esau way of talking. So again, we have a number of red flags: tone of voice, content of message, the alacrity, the quickness, the speed of getting the food. All of these things are massive red flags. Okay, so yes, verse 21. So when Jacob mentioned God, Isaac became suspicious. That's what Rashi says. So Isaac said to Jacob, please come closer so that I may feel you, my son, to see if you are my son Esau or not. So at this point, super suspicious, red flags everywhere. It's like a red flag parade at this point. And he's saying okay, at this point, we're gonna do the touch test because there's no way that I'm just gonna totally believe you that you are Esau without feeling if this is the case or not. Okay, page 173 inside the book and page verse 22 in our text. So Jacob drew near to Isaac, his father, and Isaac felt him. Isaac said, wow, The voice is like the voice of Jacob, polite, deferential, invoking or evoking God, but the hands are the hands of Esau. He did not recognize him as Jacob because his hands were hairy like his brother Esau's hands. And so he blessed him. He trusted his sense of touch over his sense of sound. We live in the world of action, right? He thought if he felt it, it must be real. All right, that's what happened. But he did one more check, one more double check. Verse 24. Isaac said, all right, last time, are you my son Esau? And what did Jacob say? I am. Again, at this point, he doesn't say I am Esau. He says, I am. Again, I'm not trying to, just subtle ways of maybe he kind of didn't. He certainly gave a misimpression of who he was. Let's continue. Verse 25. He said, all right, now that we're sure of who you are, not really, but whatever, we're going to go with this. At least let's eat. Verse 25. So he said, Isaac said to him, serve me so that I can eat my son's game. For doing this, my soul will bless you. And like I mentioned before, the connection between the food and the blessing, according to one commentary or some commentaries, I think it's the Sepharno who says this, that Isaac wanted to literally give his son a mitzvah of kibbutz, an opportunity to do a mitzvah, and to then earn the blessing through the mitzvah. So he said, give me the food, I'll eat it, and then I'm going to bless you. Verse 20. Oh, sorry, still in the middle of the verse. So Jacob served him, and he ate. He brought him wine, and he drank. Verse 26. His father Isaac said to him, please come closer and kiss me, my son. Jacob came closer, and he kissed him. Isaac smelled on his son the fragrance of what he thought was his garments, and he blessed him. He said, look, the fragrance of my son is like the fragrance of a field of apples, which God has blessed. In other words, remember, Rebecca dressed Jacob in Esau's clothing. So he got close, he smelled the garments, and he said, it smells like the field that God has blessed you with, because remember, Esau was a man of the field. And what fragrance is the fragrance of the field? Apples. I'm waiting for Tide to come out with a detergent that is apple, fresh, fragrance, Esau Jacob style. How did it smell like that if it was Jacob wearing it? Well, it was the clothing of Isaac, and it was freshly laundered and whatever. There was a way in which I guess the smell of the field was still there. I guess it's different if you're out there in the field versus inside the study hall. The clothing itself has a different fragrance. All right, so this is the text that we're going to cover today. But I want to toggle a Rashi. Let's look at Rashi, and it's actually in the Chumash also, page 172. I'm going to pull it up on the screen. Let me go back to the top, hit Rashi, or hit the button to show Rashi's commentary new. Show Rashi. There we go. And let's look at verse 27 right at the end of this reading. Okay. Verse 27. I'm going to read it from the screen. You can follow along. For those present, you can follow along under classic questions where it says Rashi. And he smelled, etc. Is it not so that there is no odor more offensive than that of washed goat skins? I mean, I don't know. Rashi asked it so rhetorically. I mean, I'm very inclined to say no. There's nothing more offensive. That's ridiculous. It's the worst smell ever. But I don't have firsthand experience. But the point is that he was draped in goat skin, in hairy goat skin on his arms and his neck. So when he went, kind of gross, right? When he went to kiss his dad, how did his dad not smell the hairy goat skins, which wouldn't smell pleasant? So let's continue inside. But this teaches us that the fragrance of the Garden of Eden entered with him, Tanchuma. It says in the Midrash Tanchuma that there was a miracle or a special, an odor that outweighed or out-fragranced the negative smell of the goat skins, and that was the fragrance of the Garden of Eden, the fragrance of paradise. And tzaddik carries the fragrance of the Garden of Eden. Remind me in a moment to tell you a story about that. Let's continue. It's like the fragrance of a field which the Lord has blessed. Rashi says, for he gave it a pleasant fragrance, and this is the field of apples. And that's what our sages explain in the Talmud tractate Tainit. Okay. Good. A few things that I want to mention. The story of fragrance. They tell a story about a fellow who once went up in Jerusalem to one of the mountains, one of the hilltops. This fellow was either trying to cause trouble, a troublemaker, or he was a bit of a loose cannon. Either way, this fellow takes a shofar, takes a ram's horn, and sounds the shofar. Did I tell the story recently? I feel like I might have. All right, maybe I didn't. So he sounds the ram's horn. Now, traditionally, the shofar will be sounded in Jerusalem when Mashiach comes and the Messiah comes. So, and this is again before Twitter and before the internet. So people hear a shofar blast from a mountain in Jerusalem, and the immediate reaction is, oh my gosh, maybe Mashiach is here. So the rumor spreads. And it went from house to house, even those outside the earshot of the shofar. And the rumor was, maybe Mashiach is here, maybe Mashiach is here. So it went to a tzaddik. I forget which tzaddik, which righteous person it was, who it was, but it came to him, somebody came to him and said, the rumor is that Mashiach is here. So the story goes, he was in his room, in his office. He stands up, goes over to the window, opens the window, smells outside, and comes back and puts his head back in and says, no, Mashiach is not here yet. In other words, he wanted to smell if it had the smell of Gan Eden, of paradise, spiritual odor. The Rebbe asked a question on the story. The Rebbe said, why didn't he just smell around him? Why did he have to go to the window? And the Rebbe answers, because in his room, it always smelled like Mashiach. It always smelled like paradise. The question was, if in the larger world, if it also smelled like Mashiach, if it also smelled like Gan Eden, it had that apple fresh scent, as Rashi explains. So that's the question that he was ascertaining. And the message for us is that yes, a human being, a righteous human being, could carry with them an aura, a spirit, even a fragrance of paradise. We should all strive to have that ambiance, that odor around us. It's Udi, how do you pronounce it? Udi Gan Eden. Udi paradise. No. Oh, Ode? Is it O? Oh gosh. Flubbed it after all that. It's O? Is O?
Oh, yes, that's water.
Who would have thought? Listen, you learn something each day. So wait, how do you pronounce it? Ode? Ode.
Like the letter O.
All right. Who would have thought? Who would have thought? Ode paradise. All right, now I sound official. I don't sound. You sound official. I'm not gonna get that right. Yes, Adina Malka. The everyman, yeah. Yeah, so as we explained in Secrets of the Bible in our course, both last week and this week, the deeper message of him taking the blessings is that he would no longer be afforded the opportunity, no longer have the luxury, Jacob would, to have exclusively a very spiritual, idyllic, sequestered, secluded life. You know, originally, there were supposed to be two dynamics. Oh, maybe I'm giving too much away for tomorrow. Whatever, it's fine. There's enough to go around for tomorrow. Right, no, it's good, it's powerful stuff. It's Kabbalah and Hasidic philosophy, Chabad Hasidic philosophy. Look, people have different personalities and different spiritual roles. Some have a role of studying Torah all day, but most people have a role of, going into the world and interacting, and they're being a mensch, and they're transforming the world into a holier place. So there's more transformation when you go into the world, but there's more purity when you're sequestered from the world. Each one has a pro and a con, right? So if you're in kollel all day studying Torah, day and night, it's beautiful, it's powerful, but your impact on making the world a better place is necessarily going to be less because you're not actually interacting with earthly things. When you're a business person or when you're out there in the world on a day-to-day basis, right? So your impact can be greater, but the challenge is obviously greater, and you don't have that spiritual paradise setting. So originally it was supposed to be that, you have different people, you have different personas. So Jacob was going to be the spiritualist, sequestered spiritualist, and Esau was going to be the guy who's out there making a difference, making the world a better place. Unfortunately, at some point, he stopped making the world a better place and started becoming corrupted by the world. He went out into the world. Instead of transforming the darkness to light, he transformed his own light into darkness. So he didn't effectively fulfill his mission, which is why Rebecca, the mother, says at a certain point, Jacob, you got to do both now. You got to wear both hats. Jacob, you need to be the one that's studying Torah all day and going out there in the world. And if that sounds impossible, you got to do it. You got to pick up the ball. He's dropping the ball on his end. He had a mission, twin missions, complementary missions, but he's not doing it. So you got to do it now. So that's the meaning of him getting the blessing. The blessing of the Esau blessing is going to be the blessing to be successful out there in the world. That would not have been Jacob's task. Jacob would have been the scholar, the secluded, sequestered scholar. If you want light, you go to him to get messages and to get, the pure light. The one who's on the ground, on the front, so to speak, the front lines, battling materialism and transforming it to holiness, that was supposed to be Esau. But at some point, he gave up on that mission, and he sunk too low. So at that point, Jacob had to assume both. Anyway, more I could say, but I don't want to cut in too much into this week's dramatic session. So, of Secrets of the Bible, which is tomorrow at 12. All right. So good to see you all. I'm just thinking, is there anything else that I wanted to share about this blessing? Look, on Friday, we're going to deal with this. The question of, is it right that he takes a blessing surreptitiously, that he kind of sneaks around and takes a blessing that's not designated for him? What if this was indeed the case, that he needed a second blessing because Esau was dropping the ball? Why didn't it just happen in a straightforward fashion? Why weren't the parents on the same page and saying, look, Esau, we love you, but until you get until you turn around spiritually, Jacob's going to have to pick up, the slack that you're leaving. Why not just be above board about it? Why does it have to happen through a complicated means? We discussed it in last week's Secrets of the Bible class, but on Friday, I'm going to give you a bit of a different twist on it. So come back Friday, DPP, same bad time, same bad channel. Okay, that's it for today. Ray, I actually missed your message from yesterday, but I saw it. I'm going to give you a call in a little bit. All right, Ray, just letting you know, I'm going to give you a call soon to talk. But otherwise, I'm going to be signing off. Stephanie, it's great to see you. Ray, it's great to see you. See you guys soon. Hope you enjoyed Daily Power Parsha. All right. Take care.